The Star Wars sequels mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But if there is one thing we can all agree on, it's that they are fascinating movies to dissect. And in celebration of that, you're watching What Culture, and these are 59 things you didn't know about the Star Wars sequel trilogy. The 19 things you didn't know about Star Wars The Force Awakens. John Boyega originally played Finn with an English accent. Many viewers were surprised to learn that Finn actor John Boyega wasn't actually American at all, but British, so impressive was his American accent in The Force Awakens. Yet, in an interview with Graham Norton ahead of the film's release, Boyega confirmed that he was indeed originally going to play Finn in his natural English twang. However, while testing the accent out in the early stages of production, director J.J. Abrams felt that it didn't quite fit Finn's character, and so asked Boyega to switch to an American accent instead. Harrison Ford was paid $25 million for his role. Much has been written about Harrison Ford's apparent lack of enthusiasm for Star Wars, and that a primary condition of him returning as Han Solo in the first place was so that the character would finally be killed off. But clearly, the primary incentive was the absolutely gargantuan payday that Ford received for the role. That's because the actor was paid a stonking $25 million to reprise Han Solo in The Force Awakens, effectively serving as a golden parachute of sorts for the actor. Brad Bird almost directed it. Many directors were considered to direct the film at various points before J.J. Abrams won out, including Jon Favreau, Guillermo del Toro, Matthew Vaughn, and even David Fincher. Yet there was only ever one candidate who got seriously close to helming it instead of Abrams. And that's The Incredibles and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol director Brad Bird, who was the top choice to take the gig, yet was forced to turn it down due to his commitments to his own blockbuster project, Tomorrowland. Needless to say, he'd still be a great pick to direct any future Star Wars film. Paparazzi flew drones over the set. With The Force Awakens being the first live-action Star Wars movie in a decade, practically the entire world was intensely following its production. Though paparazzi had a tough time getting physically close to the set to snap images, both they and overzealous fans got creative by flying drones over the film's sets in order to capture footage of the movie being shot. The situation was so fraught that Lucasfilm even inquired about having the set fitted with a drone shield, an early detection system for spotting unauthorized drone activity, yet the company's export license couldn't be granted in time. Michael Fassbender, Eddie Redmayne, and Lee Pace were considered for Kylo Ren. A role as juicy as Kylo Ren was always going to invite the attention of Hollywood's best and brightest, and that it certainly did. The three biggest rivals to Adam Driver were reportedly Michael Fassbender, Eddie Redmayne, and Lee Pace, each of whom either met with Abrams to discuss the role or straight up auditioned for it. And had, say, Fassbender or Pace played Kylo, it's difficult to picture them playing him as the petulant Darth Vader fanboy that we meet in the final film. Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill were put on an intense fitness regimen for their roles. Fans were thrilled when Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill were confirmed to be reprising their roles as Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker in The Force Awakens. Rather than just slipping back into their roles, though, before The Force Awakens started filming, both Fisher and Hamill were reportedly put on an intense fitness regime, which was a combination of diet, exercise, and stunt training. Fisher ended up losing 35 pounds to play Leia, a fact that she was less than thrilled about, while Hamill lost 50 pounds, which he credited largely to an "if it tastes good, don't eat it" diet. Rey's instant bread was a totally practical effect. One of the movie's low-key most memorable moments involves Rey eating some kind of portion of bread. It's self-rising bread which instantly rises when the flour mixture is combined with the water. The Force Awakens' special effects supervisor Chris Corbould also confirmed that the bread took 3 months to develop as a practical effect, as the team didn't want to just do it in CGI. And despite all the time and effort that went into it, the final effect was actually relatively simple. The bread prop was inflated with an air pump while the liquid in the bowl was simultaneously suctioned out. It's a genius magic trick all the same though. Luke's role was originally much larger. In earlier iterations of the script, Luke Skywalker played a much larger role in the story. Co-writer Michael Arndt explained that the decision to pare down Luke's role was actually in order to keep the focus on Rey. He said, quote, "Early on, I tried to write versions of the story where Rey is at home, her home is destroyed, and then she goes on the road and meets Luke. And then she goes and kicks the bad guy's ass. But it just never worked and I struggled with this. This was back in 2012. It just felt like every time Luke came in and entered the movie, he just took it over. Suddenly you didn't care about your main character anymore because, oh, Luke Skywalker's there, I want to see what he's going to do, end quote. It took over a month of negotiations before J.J. Abrams agreed to direct. Believe it or not, J.J. Abrams didn't immediately jump at the chance to direct the film after Brad Bird proved unavailable. Rather, he initially turned the gig down because, in his own words, he feared becoming pigeonholed as, quote, the guy who does sequels. Yet, Lucasfilm's Kathleen Kennedy was steadfast in her commitment to bringing Abrams aboard, and so began a month's worth of negotiations where she eventually convinced him to sign up. According to Abrams, Kennedy laid down some impactful words which helped sway him, saying, quote, if you want to do this and you don't, you're going to regret it. Anthony Daniels demanded that he physically portray C-3PO. Though Anthony Daniels was always going to reprise his iconic role as C-3PO in the film, J.J. Abrams originally planned for Daniels to only provide the voice for 3PO, with the physical on-set role presumably being played by a younger actor. But Daniels, who after the prequels had only voiced the character, was seemingly itching to get back into the suit and so lobbied hard to play the character on set as well. Abrams ultimately relented and a more lightweight suit was designed for Daniels to wear, which allowed him both greater comfort and mobility. Elizabeth Olsen, Jennifer Lawrence, Felicity Jones, Saoirse Ronan, and more were considered for Rey. There are a few blockbuster movie roles in recent years that were as aggressively sought out as that of the sequel trilogy's protagonist, Rey. A multitude of high-profile actresses either auditioned or were considered for the part, including Elizabeth Olsen, Jennifer Lawrence, Felicity Jones, Saoirse Ronan, Shailene Woodley, and Jessica Henwick. In Elizabeth Olsen's case, she actually ended up turning down the audition because she'd recently signed up to play the Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it's certainly easy to appreciate how actors like Saoirse Ronan and Jessica Henwick would bring something interesting to the part. J.J. Abrams called Daisy Ridley's performance wooden on her very first day. The first day on set for the new Star Wars leads must have been absolutely terrifying. And in Daisy Ridley's case, any first day jitters were made worse by director J.J. Abrams' blunt criticism of her acting chops. She said in an interview with Glamour, quote, "JJ probably doesn't remember telling me that my performance was wooden. This was the first day and I honestly wanted to die. I thought I was gonna cry, I couldn't breathe." And there were so many crew there, because obviously all the creatures had stand-ins, and there were loads of extra crew making sure everyone was safe because it was so hot. It was awful. Oscar Isaac suggested that Poe was born on Yavin 4. In Star Wars Shattered Empire, a comic released shortly before The Force Awakens, it was revealed that Poe Dameron, played by Oscar Isaac, was born on the moon Yavin 4. But rather than a piece of character shading cooked up by the Lucasfilm story group, this was actually suggested by none other than Oscar Isaac himself. After learning that Yavin 4 in the original trilogy was predominantly filmed in Guatemala, the Guatemalan-born Isaac felt like it made perfect sense for Poe himself to hail from the moon, and gave him a greater connection to the character. Captain Phasma and Supreme Leader Snoke were both gender-swapped. Two of The Force Awakens' most prominent villains were actually gender-swapped during pre-production. First Order Commander Captain Phasma was originally written as a man, with it being reported that Benedict Cumberbatch was in consideration to play the role. Yet Abrams decided to switch Phasma's gender in the middle of the casting process, a mere 3 weeks before shooting was set to start. And then there's Supreme Leader Snoke, who according to senior sculptor Ivan Manzella, was very nearly female, to the point that a full-size plasticine character model was even sculpted. Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote the Cantina music. The Cantina scene at Maz Kanata's castle is one of The Force Awakens' most evocative, and to add some atmospheric flavor to the sequence, J.J. Abrams enlisted the help of a most distinguished musical talent. Composer John Williams told Abrams that he didn't want to write the music for the Cantina scene, preferring instead to focus on the orchestral score. So when Abrams later went to watch Hamilton on Broadway, Lin-Manuel Miranda joked that he could help compose some Cantina music, being totally unaware of Williams' decision and the fact that Abrams would definitely take him up on it. Harrison Ford's onset injury put a major strain on production. Mere weeks after The Force Awakens began shooting, the production faced a major setback when Harrison Ford fractured a leg after a hydraulic door on the Millennium Falcon set fell on him. Though Ford wasn't fully recovered for around 2 months, Abrams was able to still shoot him from the waist up for select scenes, which didn't require coverage of his full body. When the timeline of Ford's recuperation wasn't yet certain as well, Disney, who adamantly refused to delay the film, reportedly considered using an on-set body double and digitally superimposing Ford's head in post-production. Thankfully, though, he healed up quickly enough that this wasn't necessary because, good lord, would that have been distracting. Bill Hader and Ben Schwartz helped create BB-8's voice. Though you likely assumed that BB-8's various bleeps and bloops were simply produced by a computer, they actually received some vocal human input from 2 unexpected performers. Bill Hader and Ben Schwartz were hired as vocal consultants for BB-8, which amounted to the pair speaking into a microphone while J.J. Abrams used an iPad app to manipulate their voices. The idea was to give a palpable human flavor to the various sounds BB-8 makes throughout the movie, and to call it one of the film's big successes is quite the understatement indeed. Tom Holland, Jesse Plemons, and Ray Fisher auditioned for Finn. The hunt for an actor to play Finn spanned far and wide across Hollywood, with a bevy of talents trying out for the role, including Tom Holland, Jesse Plemons, and Ray Fisher. Tom Holland is an especially interesting choice, given that he, of course, went on to play Spider-Man in the MCU the very next year. In his own words, though, he absolutely blew his audition as Finn, saying, quote, "I remember my audition for Star Wars. I was like 4 or 5 auditions in, and I think I was auditioning for John Boyega's role. I remember doing this scene with this lady, bless her, and she was just a drone. So I was doing all of this like, we gotta get back to the ship, and she was just going bleep bloop bleep bloop bleep bloop bleep bloop. I just couldn't stop laughing. I found it so funny, but I felt really bad because she was trying really hard to be a convincing android or drone or whatever they're called, and yeah, I obviously didn't get the part. That wasn't my best moment," end quote. Poe died in earlier versions of the script. Poe Dameron is believed to be dead early in the film when the stolen TIE fighter he and Finn escape in is shot out of the sky by a First Order Star Destroyer. Later, of course, it's revealed that Poe did indeed survive the crash alongside Finn, and if, like many fans, you felt that Poe's fairly minimal presence in the movie was at odds with his prominence in its marketing, that's probably because he originally did die in that TIE fighter crash. Earlier drafts of the script had Poe perish, and this actually made Oscar Isaac initially reluctant to take the part. However, J.J. Abrams decided to grant Poe a stay of execution after figuring out how to take him out of the movie's second act without killing him.
20 things you didn't know about Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Number 20. Mark Hamill hated Luke's characterization. Perhaps the single most divisive aspect of The Last Jedi was Luke Skywalker's characterization, reinventing him as a more world-weary, beaten-down, exiled Jedi, and one who even considered killing Kylo Ren years prior. Fans weren't the only one upset by this, as even Mark Hamill himself wasn't best pleased with how Luke was written, enough so that he made it very clear to the director, stating in an interview during the movie's press tour that he said, "I pretty much fundamentally disagree with every choice you've made for this character. Now, having said that, I've gotten it off my chest, and my job now is to take what you've created and do my best to realize your vision." Hamill did, however, later apologize for voicing his doubts and insecurities in public, and added that despite his creative misgivings, that Johnson made an all-time great movie. Number 19. The Porgs were created for one specific reason. Another relatively polarizing aspect of The Last Jedi was the introduction of the Porgs, a species of bird native to the planet where Luke exiled himself. The creatures were compared to Ewoks by some fans, who felt that they were blatant merch bait intended to appeal to very young children. Yet in actual fact, the Porgs actually came about as a result of practical problem solving during shooting. While filming the scenes on the Irish island Skellig Michael, the shoot was constantly interrupted by native puffins who would fly into shot. And so, because the puffins were a protected species and couldn't be touched, the director simply decided to include the puffins in the film but alter their appearance with CGI, because this was actually cheaper and easier than having them all painted out digitally. And so, the Porgs were born. Number 18. Obi-Wan was almost in it. Rian Johnson admitted after the film's release that he did toy with the idea of having Obi-Wan Kenobi appear as a Force ghost instead of Yoda, and yet rejected the idea for one major reason, and that was the casting. Due to the original Obi-Wan actor Alec Guinness having passed away many years ago, Johnson would have had to either use a CGI double or simply bring Ewan McGregor into the fold, and while McGregor was eager to reprise the role, Johnson wasn't quite as convinced. Ultimately, Johnson felt that having Mark Hamill interact with the McGregor version of Obi-Wan, an iteration of the character he's never shared the screen with before wouldn't feel authentic. As fun as it would have been to see Obi-Wan in the movie, Johnson was probably right here. Number 17. Carrie Fisher helped polish the script. You may or may not know that the late, great Carrie Fisher spent many years in Hollywood working a side gig as a script doctor, and in that job, she helped polish the scripts for numerous huge movies such as Hook, Sister Act, and The Wedding Singer, and even punched up the dialogue for the Star Wars prequels. Though Fisher more or less retired from script doctor work after the prequels came out, she did end up helping Rian Johnson complete the script for The Last Jedi. According to Johnson, he visited Fisher's house and they went over the entire script in fine detail, with Fisher making numerous suggestions, including rewriting much of Leia's own dialogue. Script doctors typically go uncredited for their work, and their contributions may only be revealed years or even decades later. Yet due to Fisher's untimely passing before The Last Jedi's release, it was fitting for Johnson to make that information public during the press tour. Number 16. Kylo Ren's scar was actually changed between movies. Near the end of The Force Awakens, Kylo Ren takes a shot to the face from Rey's lightsaber, leaving him with a significant scar running from his hairline down to his jaw. However, a few eagle-eyed fans noticed that Kylo's scar had subtly changed between the movies, shifting from between his eyebrows to instead cutting through his right eyebrow and going further down his right cheek. In a now deleted tweet, Johnson said that he made the call himself, and it was purely for the sake of his own aesthetic preferences. While it's unlikely that the fans would have been hugely bothered by the original scar placement, this just goes to show the many hundreds of tiny creative decisions that go into even the most seemingly mundane parts of a massive blockbuster movie. Number 15. Tatiana Maslany, Gina Rodriguez, Olivia Cook, and others were considered for Rose. The role of Resistance member Rose Tico was heavily sought out in Hollywood, as of course eventually went to the largely unknown Kelly Marie Tran. It's especially impressive on Tran's part, considering that she had to fend off competition from a bevy of considerably more established and well-known actresses. This included the likes of Tatiana Maslany, Gina Rodriguez, and Olivia Cook, all of whom made the shortlist and may have been even screen tested for the part. Ultimately, hiring an unknown actor to play Rose may have been for the best though, allowing her to function as an easy audience surrogate without the distracting potential a more high-profile performer might have brought to the role. Number 14. Mark Hamill also plays a secret second role. In addition to finally giving Luke Skywalker a full reprise in The Last Jedi, Mark Hamill also plays a secret second character in the film who appears in the movie's divisive Canto Bight sequence. Hamill asked Rian Johnson if he could play a CGI creation in the film in addition to his upfront duties, and ended up being cast as Dobu Skay, the mischievous drunk amphibian gambler who hilariously mistakes BB-8 for a slot machine and inserts a coin in him. Hamill not only provided the small voice role for the character, but according to Hamill himself, also wore a motion capture suit on set to act out his movements. Number 13. It was the first Star Wars film to show books and paper. You probably remember that Luke Skywalker had custody of a collection of sacred Jedi text on his exile planet, but you may not have put two and two together and appreciated that this is actually the first time that we've ever seen books and paper in the canonical cinematic universe. The presence of the Jedi text confirms once and for all, after so many decades, that paper does indeed exist as we know it in the world of Star Wars, despite information typically being stored and presented digitally. It's a fascinating sliver of low-key world building that has evidently been taken for granted by most fans, confirming just how damn ancient those Jedi texts truly are. Number 12. The DJ character was almost Lando Calrissian. Benicio del Toro has a small but vital role in the film as DJ, an underworld codebreaker who ends up double-crossing the Resistance to General Hux in order to win his own freedom. In the early scripting stages, however, the role was actually written for Lando Calrissian, but Rian Johnson ultimately decided to reinvent the part as an entirely new character because he didn't want to have Lando categorically betray the heroes. Lando's certainly no stranger to subterfuge or looking out for number one, but at least he usually does the right thing in the end. DJ, on the other hand, well, he never gets his redeeming moment and effectively just disappears out of the story after turning on Finn and Rose. Lando, of course, finally returned to the franchise in The Rise of Skywalker, albeit only in a piecemeal, strictly fan-serving capacity. Number 11. BB-8 says, "I've got a bad feeling about this." It was initially reported that The Last Jedi was the first film in the Skywalker saga to omit a variation of the iconic phrase, "I have a bad feeling about this," but yet that's actually not the case. Instead, Rian Johnson decided to get a little cute with this one and include the one-liner in a highly concealed form. Johnson confirmed that BB-8 actually says the very same phrase to Poe Dameron in the movie's opening scene, making a series of binary beeping noises as they take on the First Order. Upon hearing and understanding BB-8's anxiety, Poe responds with, "Happy beeps here, buddy, come on. And Johnson said of the inclusion, it seemed like a fun character to deliver that line. I think originally I had Poe respond, oh, I got a good feeling about it, keep your chin up. And then I made it a little less explicit just to make it more fun. Number 10. George Lucas thought that it was much better than The Force Awakens. Back in 2019, then Disney CEO Bob Iger released his memoirs, which included the revelation that George Lucas wasn't actually too keen on Star Wars The Force Awakens. He said he didn't hide his disappointment. There's nothing new, Lucas said. In each of the films in the original trilogy, it was important to him to present new worlds, new stories, new characters, and new technologies. In this one, he said, there weren't enough visual or technical leaps forward. It's perhaps fitting then that Lucas was reportedly far more impressed with the more original boundary-pushing The Last Jedi. After seeing the film, Lucas called it beautifully made and spoke directly with Johnson to praise him further. To date, Lucas hasn't offered up his opinion on The Rise of Skywalker, though the fact that he was absent from its world premiere could definitely be telling. Number 9. Carrie Fisher's dog Gary has a cameo. If you know much about Carrie Fisher's personal life, you're very likely aware that she adored her pet French bulldog, aptly named Gary Fisher. In addition to traveling with Fisher everywhere she went, Gary actually ended up making a sneaky cameo appearance in The Last Jedi, showing up as an alien pet by an unidentified creature in the Canto Bight sequence. It's a fleeting appearance that's tricky to spot, but it was indeed confirmed by Rian Johnson on the eve of the film's release, and better yet, apparently Gary had quite the bull watching himself on the big screen at the movie's premiere. Number 8. Maz Kanata's role was cut down during rewrites. After Maz Kanata was given such a strong and memorable introduction in The Force Awakens, fans understandably expected to see more of her in The Last Jedi. But alas, Maz shows up for just a minute-long cameo appearance in the film and left fans both mystified and disappointed. However, Maz originally had a much larger role in the story, as she was initially supposed to appear at the Resistance base on Crate, with the concept art from the book The Art of Star Wars The Last Jedi confirming this. J.J. Abrams even shot a scene for The Force Awakens which showed Maz returning to the Resistance base. Yet because there wasn't anything for her to do but simply sit around, it was decided to remove it. And so this had a knock-on effect on The Last Jedi, resulting in Maz's role being reduced during rewrites, and in the end this is all we got. Number 7. Frank Oz helped direct and edit the Yoda scene. One of The Last Jedi's biggest surprises was the unexpected appearance of Yoda, who shows up in Force Ghost form not as a digital creation, but as a classic practical puppet. In addition to Frank Oz providing the voice for Yoda and operating the Yoda puppet, he actually helped direct the scene on set and then went into the editing room with Rian Johnson to provide added assistance. Given Oz's decades of experience working with puppets, Johnson invited him to help shape the Yoda scene in post-production. Oz primarily aided Johnson in editing around the puppet to maximize its presence on screen and make Yoda feel real to the audience. And you know what? This was definitely a success. Number 6. Anthony Daniels was disappointed by C-3PO's small role. Now, Mark Hamill wasn't the only legacy actor a little miffed about his character's treatment in the movie. Anthony Daniels was also unhappy with C-3PO's role in The Last Jedi. In Daniels' case, it was less about the creative particulars of 3PO's presence than the sheer size of his role, with Daniels saying, "In The Last Jedi, I became a table decoration, which I regretted because 3PO was worth more than that." Now, Daniels isn't really wrong, in that C-3PO spends most of the film aboard Vice Admiral Holdo's ship and doing little of major consequence. Ironically, Daniels was decidedly far more enthusiastic about his part in The Rise of Skywalker, with the film giving 3PO far more to do. Number 5. Rose's personality was changed during production. Curiously, the movie's most air quotes controversial and divisive character was one who underwent a fair reworking during production. Though when we first meet Rose, she's something of a Resistance fangirl and remains a pillar of chirpy optimism throughout, Rian Johnson originally wrote her as a more dour and cynical character. Once he cast Kelly Marie Tran and saw how she interacted with John Boyega, he tweaked Rose to be less surly and more hopeful. He said the character was written as more of an Eeyore type initially in the script, so she was little more grumpy and didn't really trust Finn. The more I got to know Kelly, she just has this open, beautiful spirit, and I thought you have to see that at the beginning of this character. That's got to be what this character is about. It was really because of Kelly that the whole dynamic of the character changed, thank God. Would a less open-hearted take on the character have changed fan perception of Rose? Well, considering the bigoted basis of many fans' issues with Rose, probably not, unfortunately. Number 4. Joseph Gordon-Levitt voiced the alien Slow and Low. Joseph Gordon-Levitt starred in Rian Johnson's stellar directorial debut Brick and later his 2012 sci-fi masterpiece Looper, and has made cameo appearances in all of Johnson's other films since. Gordon-Levitt had a voice cameo in The Last Jedi, portraying the alien creature known as Slow and Low during the Canto Bight sequence. The character's peculiar moniker is a reference to the Beastie Boys song Slow and Low, what with executive producer J.J. Abrams being a huge fan of the rap group. Number 3. It's the only main Star Wars movie without a lightsaber duel. The Last Jedi is the first mainline film in the series without a lightsaber duel. Though Rogue One lacked a saber fight the year before The Last Jedi, this is the first of the 9 main Skywalker saga movies without one. For despite Kylo Ren and Rey using their laser swords to dispose of Snoke and his Praetorian guards during the iconic throne room scene, they're the only ones using lightsabers in this sequence, so it's not actually a duel. And of course, just when it seems like we're going to get an epic showdown between Kylo Ren and Luke at the film's end, we learn that Luke simply force projecting himself onto that location, preventing the possibility of a duel. It's a totally on-brand move for a Star Wars movie so concerned with upending audience expectations, even if, like some of the movie's other creative calls, it did leave some fans firmly disappointed. Number 2. Tom Hardy's cameo as a stormtrooper was cut. Just about everybody wants to make a cameo appearance in Star Wars, and after Daniel Craig made a brilliant appearance as a stormtrooper in The Force Awakens, fans were eager to see who would show up in The Last Jedi. Yet despite persistent pre-release reports that Tom Hardy will be playing a stormtrooper, he was nowhere to be seen or heard, and Rian Johnson later revealed that his role was actually cut. The deleted scene was eventually released, showing Hardy playing a southern accented stormtrooper who knows Finn, and seeing him suited up in Captain's uniform for his mission sees him express surprise that he's climbed the ranks, while seemingly oblivious to Finn's defection from the First Order. Johnson hasn't ever confirmed why Hardy's role was cut, though it's safe to say that it was either due to pacing, after all the final cut was 152 minutes long, or because Hardy's southern caricature was perhaps a little bit too silly for its own good. And number 1, actor Timothy D. Rose was left in tears over Admiral Akbar's death. Many fans were left disappointed by the death of Admiral Akbar at the hands of Kylo Ren, but nobody was more crestfallen than Timothy D. Rose, who played Akbar in 1983's Return of the Jedi and returned to portray him in both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. In addition to expressing frustration with the secrecy on set while shooting both The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, Rose felt that Akbar's death was treated as a joke on set. He said, "We finished all of our bits and they asked me to come down to camera and I thought, oh well, maybe they're going to say thank you for being one of the heritage characters and giving 30 years and all that. But what they did was ask me to look at the camera and say, it's a wrap. I was actually in tears in the suit because I thought, after everything, after hoping there'd be something, after knowing that there wasn't going to be anything else, Akbar's final moment before he went into the box was a big joke about it's a wrap." Rose's comments have earned him a lot of sympathy from fans who also felt that Akbar should have received a more ceremonious and meaningful demise rather than being disposed of so flippantly. To compensate for this though, General Akbar's son was introduced as a minor character in The Rise of Skywalker. 20 things you didn't know about Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. Number 20. Rian Johnson was offered to direct after Colin Trevorrow's departure. Now, it's no secret that Colin Trevorrow of Jurassic World fame was originally hired to direct The Rise of Skywalker, yet ultimately exited the project amid creative differences, albeit still retaining a story by credit in the final film. The Force Awakens director J.J. Abrams was of course drafted in to replace him, yet before he secured the gig, Lucasfilm did reach out to The Last Jedi's Rian Johnson to see if he was interested in the job, but Johnson refused, feeling that he needed time off between The Last Jedi and what would have been his next project, Knives Out. Plus, it's fair to assume that participating in The Rise of Skywalker would have pushed back production on Knives Out, which was clearly a passion project for Johnson. And above all else, can anyone blame him for not returning after the volcanic fan response to The Last Jedi? Number 19. The plot was changed massively during production. Since the film's release, numerous cast and crew members have gone on the record to attest that The Rise of Skywalker's story was changed significantly during production, with rewrites continuing throughout shooting. The earlier drafts of the shooting script didn't even feature Emperor Palpatine, while various discarded elements included Kylo Ren receiving the Sith Wayfinder from a spider-like alien called the Oracle, and later torturing Chewbacca, Finn having Force sensitivity, and Kylo Ren even surviving. It wasn't long before the film's editor, Marianne Brandon, even admitted that the production was rushed to meet Disney's set-in-stone release date, and looking at the messy final product, it's clear that there was no unified vision of what Abrams or anybody else at Lucasfilms wanted it to be. Number 18. Adam Driver did all of his own stunts. Now, a lot of actors like to say that they did all or at least most of their own stunts on big blockbuster films, but in Adam Driver's case, he actually has the receipts to back it up. The Rise of Skywalker's stunt coordinator, Eunice Huthart, confirmed in an interview that Driver truly did do all of his own stunt work, such that his stunt double never actually suited up. He said, "Yeah, he did do all of his own stunts, and lucky for him. Most actors will always say to me, I want to do all my own stunts. Sometimes they're just not capable. They want to be in character, they want to be a part of everything, but they just can't do it where it's at a believable level as the character should be." Adam Driver, on the other hand, is as good as any stuntman. He's absolutely fantastic, and he worked so hard. He did everything. The stunt double never even got into costume on The Rise of Skywalker. Adam Driver did everything. Number 17. Rose has just 76 seconds of screen time. One of the most prominent new characters in the sequel trilogy was Resistance mechanic Rose, who first showed up in The Last Jedi and quickly became a romantic interest for Finn. Despite the generally positive response to the character, actress Kelly Marie Tran received a torrent of sexist and racist abuse following the film's release. Numerous public figures came out in support of Tran, and so it was hugely surprising for fans when Rose ended up having nothing more than a glorified cameo in The Rise of Skywalker, appearing on screen for a grand total of just 76 seconds in the 142-minute movie. Many interpreted this as J.J. Abrams and Lucasfilm kowtowing to the misogynists and racists who complained about Rose's inclusion in The Last Jedi. However, one of the film's writers later stated that Rose was supposed to have a larger role opposite Princess Leia, but when some of the digitally altered footage to facilitate the late Fisher's inclusion didn't meet the required standard, her part had to be trimmed down. As for Tran, she was diplomatic about her reduced role, saying at the 2020 Oscars, "At the end of the day, I got to be part of something bigger than me, and that's really special." Number 16. Rey was almost related to Obi-Wan. Perhaps the biggest question mark following the release of The Last Jedi related to Rey's parentage. Though Kylo Ren claimed that she was born to nobody junkers, many fans suspected that J.J. Abrams would retcon this in The Rise of Skywalker and reveal that Kylo was lying. And while that did indeed happen, with Rey eventually being revealed to be Palpatine's granddaughter, numerous alternate scenarios were considered throughout production. In an interview after the film's release, Daisy Ridley revealed that an early idea involved her being related to Obi-Wan Kenobi. They pitched the film to me and were like, "Oh yeah, Palpatine's the granddaddy," and I was like, "Awesome." Then 2 weeks later, he was like, "We're not so sure," so it kept changing. Even as we were filming, I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be. At the beginning, they were toying with, like, an Obi-Wan connection. While fans remain sharply divided on the issue of Rey's parentage, it's highly likely that having her be related to Obi-Wan would have felt ham-fisted and inauthentic. Number 15. A stolen copy of the script ended up on eBay because of John Boyega. A few weeks before the film's release, J.J. Abrams reported that a copy of the script ended up on eBay during production, and in order to prevent spoilers leaking online, a Disney employee quickly purchased the script for an undisclosed sum after verifying its authenticity. Abrams wouldn't disclose which actor let their screenplay slip, though mere days later, John Boyega admitted that he was the one. He said, "Let me just tell you how this one went down. I was moving apartments and I left the script under my bed. I was just like, you know what, I'll leave it under my bed. When I wake up in the morning, I'll take it and move. But my boys came over and, we started partying a little and the script it just stayed there. Then a few weeks later, a cleaner comes in, finds the script and puts it on eBay for like £65. So the person did not know the true value." Talk about a close call, right? Number 14. The Babu Frick puppet required 5 puppeteers. As divisive as the movie was, most of us can agree that one of its surefire breakout characters was Babu Frick, the adorable alien droid smith who helps the heroes by retrieving information from C-3PO's memory banks. Despite being just 9 inches tall, Babu Frick's mechanical complexity required the combined efforts of 5 puppeteers to convincingly bring him to life. These puppeteers were kitted out in green screen costumes which were then digitally erased during post-production. In addition to voicing Babu, actress Shirley Henderson also learned how to puppet Babu's mouth on set, in turn helping her get in sync with the crew for improvisation. Number 13. Leia's wardrobe and hair were changed with CGI. It's no secret that Carrie Fisher's role in The Rise of Skywalker was achieved by digitally manipulating unused material from The Force Awakens, namely altering the backgrounds of her scenes and re-editing dialogue to give it new context. Beyond that, VFX was also used to change Leia's wardrobe and add grey colouring to her hair, ensuring that her appearance fell in line with how she looked in The Last Jedi. As tricky as Leia's inclusion in the movie was, the VFX team evidently did a rock-solid job under enormous enormous time constraints. After all, who among us ever noticed that Fisher's clothes and hair were also CGI? Number 12. Mark Hamill voiced the alien Boolio. Just as Mark Hamill had a secret second role in The Last Jedi, playing the monocled alien Dobu Skay on Canto Bight, he also had a sneaky second part in The Rise of Skywalker. Beyond reappearing as the Force ghost of Luke Skywalker, Hamill also provided the voice for Boolio, an alien miner who aided the Resistance during the movie. The character was performed on set by Aidan Cook, while Hamill slyly took his credit under the pseudonym Patrick Williams, a moniker that combines the first names of his two brothers. Now perhaps Hamill should become the Stan Lee of the Star Wars movies at this point, a kind of good luck charm who shows up to play a random minor character in each film. Wouldn't that be great? Number 11. Ian McDiarmid was skeptical about returning. Emperor Palpatine's resurrection remains one of The Rise of Skywalker's most divisive plot points, and even Ian McDiarmid himself wasn't exactly sure about it, given the character's pretty concrete demise in The Return of the Jedi. And during an interview at the film's UK premiere, he said, "I thought I was dead. I thought he was dead. Because when we did Return of the Jedi and I was thrown down that chute to galactic hell, he was dead." And I said, "Oh, does he come back?" And George Lucas said, "No, he's dead." So I just accepted that. But then, of course, I didn't know I was going to be doing the prequels, so in a sense he wasn't dead because we went back to revisit him when he was a young man. But I was totally surprised by this. One can only imagine that a dump truck full of cash quickly allayed any lingering doubts that he might have had about returning. Number 10. Mark Hamill compared the film's secrecy to being in the CIA. While every Star Wars movie is produced under a sure veil of secrecy, J.J. Abrams and company took this cloak and dagger approach especially seriously whilst shooting the conclusion to the Skywalker saga. Even before filming started, Mark Hamill said that the revised pages of the script were hand-delivered by a Disney rep who flew to meet him. And while he was allowed to keep pages of The Last Jedi script overnight by locking them in a safe, for The Rise of Skywalker, he had to hand them back after reading. Hilariously, Hamill had a unique comparison for the aggressive secrecy surrounding the script. It's like working for some secret deep state government organization, like being in the CIA. In addition to this, The Rise of Skywalker was released without any external test screenings, and even Abrams himself hadn't seen the final cut until literally days before it hit cinemas. Number 9. It borrowed one major idea from George Lucas. Though George Lucas's original ideas for a potential sequel trilogy were largely thrown out of the window when Disney acquired Lucasfilm, one of his significant discarded concepts for the original trilogy did in fact make it into The Rise of Skywalker. Near the end of the film, during her climactic battle with Palpatine, Rey hears the voices of various departed Jedi, including Obi-Wan, as voiced by both Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Mace Windu, who give Rey the resolve to continue fighting. The idea of having departed Jedi provide the hero with a morale boost came from Lucas's original script for Return of the Jedi almost 40 years prior, where the Force ghosts of Obi-Wan and Yoda show up to shield Luke Skywalker from the Emperor's lightning attack and deflect it. Lucas ultimately abandoned the idea, but the ditched scene ended up laying the groundwork for Rey's own Force assist at the end of this movie. Number 8. Dominic Monaghan won his role due to a bet with J.J. Abrams. Dominic Monaghan has a small role in the film as Resistance Trooper, and while you might assume that J.J. Abrams simply put him in the movie due to their friendship, seeing as the pair had previously worked together on Lost, it was actually the result of a bet. When Abrams was rewriting the script before shooting, he and Dominic made a bet on the outcome of the 2018 World Cup between England and Colombia. They basically said, if England beat Colombia, you're in. And I was like, oh mate, you bastard. Thankfully, the nail-biting match worked out in Dominic's favour, with England winning 4-3 on penalties and securing his place in The Rise of Skywalker. We like to think that Abrams would have relented to let his pal join the cast anyway, but you never know. Number 7. Maz Kanata was entirely animatronic. Maz Kanata briefly reappeared in the film, and while you'd be understood for assuming that the character was once again achieved through state-of-the-art VFX, as in the two previous films, she was actually entirely practical this time around. J.J. Abrams preferred to use tangible effects wherever possible, and so insisted upon an animatronic puppet for Maz in The Rise of Skywalker. And so for the film, Industrial Light and Magic's creature effects supervisor Neil Scanlon went about creating one of the most complex puppets in cinema history. He said, in this case, we used a data suit that was worn by a puppeteer, and as that person would move, Maz would mimic it. There was a puppeteer who was responsible for the dialogue, and there was a puppeteer responsible for the eyeline and the expressions. Those puppeteers could be right next to JJ and they could see Maz and they could be in the scene. Considering that pretty much anyone who saw the film assumed that Maz was once again a digital creation, this was most certainly a job well done. Number 6. Matt Smith was in talks for a secret role. In August 2018, the same month that the film began shooting, it was reported that Matt Smith had joined the cast in a secret role, which of course turned out to be untrue. Nevertheless, in recent times, Smith has confirmed that he was indeed in talks for a juicy part, albeit without confirming the precise nature of the role. He said, "We were very close to me being in it, but then it just never quite happened. I think the thing they were thinking of me for, eventually the part became obsolete and they didn't need it, so I never got to be in Star Wars." Smith later called it a transformative Star Wars story detail, and rumours have swirled for years that he was originally set to play a dark side acolyte whose body ends up being possessed by Palpatine. As goofy as that sounds, Smith's presence as a quasi-reincarnated Palpatine would have certainly been interesting to behold. Number 5. 500,000 gallons of water were used for the Death Star set. Now later in the movie, Rey ends up facing off against Kylo Ren atop the crashed ruins of the second Death Star, which has become completely waterlogged after falling into the ocean. To achieve a convincingly moist set, the crew used water cannons to pump 5,000 gallons of water for every single take, and after 3 days of filming, this reportedly amounted to 500,000 gallons of water being pumped. And yet, this pales in comparison to the amount of digital water used for the choppy ocean current surrounding Rey and Kylo during their fight. A total of 4.2 million gallons was simulated through CGI. Number 4. Billie Lourd wore the same outfit her mother did in Return of the Jedi. Carrie Fisher's daughter Billie Lourd reprised her sequel trilogy role of Lieutenant Cadel Ko Connix in the film. Yet with this being the first Star Wars movie Lourd participated in since her mother's passing, J.J. Abrams came up with a wardrobe-based tribute. Connix had a relatively small background role throughout the film, but eagle-eyed fans might have noticed that she wears an extremely similar outfit, Leia's camouflage-style getup while on Endor in Return of the Jedi, with Lourd's hair even being styled in the same fashion. To complete the symmetry, Lourd was also 26 years old at the time of shooting, which is precisely the same age that her mother was whilst filming the third entry in the original trilogy. As George Lucas once famously said, "It's like poetry, it rhymes." Number 3. The digital release was brought forward due to the pandemic. Now, the film was originally intended to be released on digital platforms on Tuesday, March 17th, 2020, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic forcing large swathes of the world to stay inside, Disney decided to bring the release forward by 4 days, dropping it on Friday, March the 13th instead, just 2 days after WHO declared COVID-19 a global pandemic. Even though The Rise of Skywalker fell short of expectations for a lot of fans, it was still a neat and unexpected gesture by Disney to drop the film early on digital and help keep those sheltering at home entertained during a period of major anxiety and uncertainty. Number 2. Adam Driver recorded some of his dialogue in his house. The Star Wars franchise's long-tenured supervising sound editor Matthew Wood confirmed that some of Kylo Ren's dialogue in the film wasn't actually recorded on set or in a professional recording studio, but in Adam Driver's own home. Just a few weeks before the film's release, changes to the script required Driver to record a few lines for his character, but with Driver's schedule being so busy, Wood ended up visiting the actor's Brooklyn home to capture the dialogue. He said, "The very last recording we did was, well, we had to change some of the lines of Kylo when he had his mask on, so I went to Driver's house in Brooklyn. I ended up opening up one of his closets where he had all of these suits, and I just pushed the suits out of the way and said, 'Hang your head in there.'" It's hilarious to picture Adam Driver ducking his head into his own closet and speaking as Kylo Ren, all while J.J. Abrams monitors the recording session via video call back in Los Angeles. And yet, you'd be hard-pressed to identify the hastily recorded dialogue in the final cut of the movie. And number 1, Alec Guinness's granddaughter played a First Order officer. Star Wars is all about family above all else, of course, and so it's fitting that J.J. Abrams managed to include the descendant of a departed franchise legend in a small cameo role. Sally Guinness, herself an actress and the granddaughter of original Obi-Wan Kenobi actor Alec Guinness, appears briefly in the film as a First Order officer during the scene where Kylo Ren addresses a council. As cute a cameo as this is, it's also mildly hilarious that the granddaughter of one of the most prominent heroes in the Star Wars franchise ended up playing a grunt on the other side.